Okay, welcome to Nicolay College. My name is Warren Krause. I'll be your welding symbols instructor. I kind of wanted to give you a little video about your actual welding symbol, because when you go to chapter 14, that'll be the first chapter you'll be working in. A big welding symbol pops up and there's stuff scattered all over it. It could be a little bit confusing. So I kind of wanted to break it down so it would help clarify a few things. Alright, first things first. This whole thing here and everything on it is called the welding symbol. ING means a lot. So as we put a weld symbol in there, the whole thing, keep in mind, is still called the welding symbol. As we start going and break this welding symbol down, the most important part is this horizontal line. This horizontal line is called your reference line. It's very important because it references where the weld goes. So as we start making a complete welding symbol, what do I mean by referencing? I put a weld symbol in there. Where does that weld go? Here's a T-joint. Anything below this reference line is applied to what they call arrow side. So where would that weld go? That weld would go right there. That's where that weld would go. Anything above that reference line, let's say we put another fillet weld on there, that means other side. What does that mean? That means our weld goes on the other side. That's where that would weld. So anything above this reference line refers to other side or opposite side of the arrow. Anything below that reference line applies to arrow side. And keep in mind, this arrow can point in any direction. It may point down like that. It may point up in an upward direction. An upward direction like that. It still means that weldment is applied to arrow side. So it does not matter where the arrow points. That's why these reference lines are always horizontal. So anything below that reference line, arrow side. Anything above, other side or opposite side of that arrow. Now, you'll see there are dimensions given in this reference line. What do I mean by dimensions? Let's say if I put a 1/4 inch right here immediately to the left. So right now, it's telling me a 1/4 inch fillet weld arrow side. So that first dimension immediately to the left of any welding symbol is going to be the size of the weld. What does that mean? For a fillet weld, that means this is going to be a 1/4 inch. This dimension from here to here is going to be a 1/4 inch. Dimension from here to here, 1/4 inch. So it is telling me my weld size. Same, we can put a weld size on the top. So let's say if we say 1/2 inch. Our weld size now right here, from here to here, is a 1/2 inch. Weld size from here to here is a 1/2 inch. Now these are very simple. These are basic fillet weld symbols. We'll get into groove weld symbols, spot, seam, plugs, all those types of symbols as you get into further chapters. I basically wanted to go kind of give you a brief explanation of some of the things that are on that welding symbol. Like I said, it's very confusing when you open it up to chapter 14. There's a lot of things on there. Okay. Main thing is, understand that reference line. Anything above is always other side. Anything below is called always arrow side. Sides is always immediately to the left. Now let's break that down a little more as we go through this. I'll put another fillet weld and I'll put it arrow side. What does this mean? Let's say we put a 1/4 inch. We'll put a 1/4 inch fillet weld. Right there, again, that's the dimension. Now, a number immediately to the right, let's say if I put a 6 there, that is telling me the length of that fillet weld. So as you look at it from a side view, and I put a weld on top of here, and I stop, the length of that weld is 6 inches. Or whatever it might be metric. So the number immediately to the left is always size. The number immediately to the right is always the length. Now we're just talking about fillet welds to get started. Like I said, I'll dive into groove welds and stuff as we go. Now, same symbol, I'll put all the same dimensions right back in, 6 inches. There's usually a hyphen, and there's another number. Let's say 12. What does that tell you? Well, number one, we're still arrow side, 1/4 inch fillet weld. Weld length. So as I look at this from a side view, I make a weld, stop, make another weld, stop. So what they call this is what they call intermittent or stitch welding. Our weld length here is still 6 inches. Still 6 inch weld length. But now, well, that 12 inch is telling me that these welds are on 12 inch center to center weld. So as we start breaking down this welding symbol, it should help clarify a few of the things on there. Anything immediately to the left, always size. Immediately to the right, length. Fillet weld symbols usually have, if they're not continuous, it's pitch. So again, 6 inch weld length, 12 inch pitch. Pitch is always from center to weld to center to weld. Now, if there is nothing to the right of that weld symbol, same joint, that means that weld is welded continuously. The whole fillet joint is welded continuously. Alright, that's kind of a breakdown of fillet welds. Now we can kind of break down contours of the actual weld. For example, what is a contour? So for example, that is a flat or a flush fillet weld, it's called. So the contour of that weld is flat or flush, is what they call it. We can also have convex and concave fillet welds. Concave fillet weld kind of bubbles in. So our weld size is still going to be the same, but now they want a contour of a concave fillet weld, or you could have convex. Bubbles out, bubbles in, excuse me. So you can have a weld that bubbles out. Those are what they call the contours. Usually if you have a contour, a lot of times you'll have what they call a finishing process there. You might have a letter M or a G there. They're all right in the book. That letter is telling you how to get that contour. So for example, if our contour has to be flat or flush, We can actually get that contour by G represents grinding. So we have a 1/4 inch fillet weld, flat contour. How are we going to get that flat contour? We can do that by grinding. Machining, rolling, there's multiple different ways you can do it. Now keep in mind, everything that we've done so far has been on arrow side. All this information can be on the other side also. I know it gets kind of confusing when you go to the other side. So for example, if I do this, those two symbols are the same. We're looking for a convex fillet weld. That contour is always going to be in relationship to that weld symbol. These would be concave. So everything can be on either side of the arrow, depending on where you want to put it. So for example, we have a flat fillet weld arrow side. Let's put a convex fillet weld other side. That's what that means. We've talked a lot about fillet welds. Fillet welds are fairly simple to understand. Just keep in mind, anything to the left of that fillet weld symbol always represents size. Anything to the right, first number is always length of the weld. Second number is always the pitch. Length, pitch. As far as fillet welds go, you'll get more into staggered and fillet welds and things like that. I'll do another video for when we get to the fillet weld chapter. I kind of want to break down this welding symbol so you have a little bit better idea as we go through. Now I'm going to bring up what they call a V-groove weld symbol. V-groove looks like this. It forms a V. There's two pieces that are being prepped. Now I'm going to do that reference line. Why am I doing a V-groove? Because there's a lot of things in groove welds that you can put into that welding symbol that you do not have on fillet weld symbols. So we'll do V-groove. It's arrow side. So everything that we see is going to be in this side of the arrow. I'm going to put some numbers in here. So let's do 1/2 inch. And then let's go 3/4 of an inch. What does that mean? Well, that 1/2 inch dimension is telling me what they call depth of preparation. That is that dimension. That's where that goes. It is telling me that that bevel goes down 1/2 inch into that material. The depth of preparation. Now, the 3/4 inch dimension, that is telling me the weld size. Same thing as a fillet weld. Very first number to the left is always going to tell me weld size. It doesn't matter what size, what we're in. So weld size. So I go ahead. I put a weld in here. That is telling me from here to here is my weld size. That's 3/4 of an inch. Now, anything that goes above that base metal right here does not get included into weld size. So what does that mean? That means in all groove welds, the max weld size that we can have for a groove weld is the thickness of the material. So for example, if that weld goes all the way through, we're using 3/4 inch material. That material is being welded all the way through. So that's what these dimensions are telling you here. This is always what they call depth of preparation. That's how far our bevel is being cut into the material. 3/4 inch here is telling me the size of the weld. Now there are going to be times where the size of the weld is less than the thickness of the material. So Anything that is welded completely all the way through tells me that it's complete joint penetration. Anything that is not welded completely through is what they call partial joint penetration. But to give you an understanding of what's going on here, that first number is depth of preparation. Number immediately to the left is my weld size. All right, now next question. We do have examples that look like this. What would be let's say this is a piece of 1-inch material. Now, if there's a number right here, and there's only one number, that tells me that these pieces are beveled all the way through that piece of material. There's no need to have a 1 and a 1 there. If there's only one number there, it is telling you the depth of preparation is the same as the weld size. So as we go further in depth in our V groove, we draw them a little bigger because we're going to get more detail here. I'm going to use the same dimensions we used before. Put 3/4 as my weld size, 1/2 inch depth of bevel. Now we can work down or above a weld symbol with other dimensions. What am I trying to explain here? For example, we could have an 1/8 inch here. What does that 1/8 inch mean? That 1/8 inch is telling me the root opening. What's a root opening? That is that dimension right here. That's an 1/8 inch. That means that those two pieces do not meet together. There's a gap in between those two pieces. Next, we can also have our angle. So for example, 45 degrees. What does that mean? That means that this angle right here is 45 degrees. That's your included angle. That's the whole angle of the joint. Now if we would have took these to the bandsaw, what would I cut this angle? I'd cut this one at 22.5, this one at 22.5 to equal 45. When we start talking about weld symbols, it's going to follow this format for every symbol. Length, depth of preparation, root opening, angle. Now we can also have a contour here. Flat. So when we weld that, put a G there, we have to actually grind that flat. So you take a grinder, grind that flat. Now all the information we were talking about here is it's on arrow side. You can have the exact information on the opposite arrow side. So let's do an example like that. Here's my V groove. Now my weld symbol is going to go on the other side. Still have all our dimensions. 1/2 inch. Keep in mind that 1/2 inch is still telling me that dimension for both sides. 3/4. Still telling me weld size. Then we can have another dimension. Going above, 1/8 inch. That's my root opening, the distance between here. Angle, let's say 60-degree angle. That's my angle of my joint. Contour, flat, by grinding. So here's my weld when I'm completed. I grind that flat. So as you can see, root opening is always going to be first. Angle is always second. Contour and finishing process is always last. They're always going to go in that sequence. It doesn't matter if you're above that reference line or below that reference line. Now typically, when you talk about groove joints, usually groove joints are welded continuous. They don't have a certain length that they actually do. So hopefully this is helping you as you look on that reference line in chapter 14. All the stuff on there, hopefully this is starting to make a little sense. All right. Now, as you look on that same page, on chapter 14, you'll see there's some other symbols on that welding symbol. For example, you'll see that there's a circle right here. What does that circle mean? That circle means we weld all the way around. For example, if we had a piece of pipe right here, here's a piece of pipe that's hollow in the center. Now if I put a fill weld symbol here, what does that mean? Well, number one, that means arrow side. I'm going to put green so you can kind of see the difference. Green. Well, that means arrow side. That little circle tells me weld all the way around. So I'm going to weld all the way around. That's what that means. And you can still have arrow side, opposite arrow side, with weld all the way around. Main reason being, because if we put another fill weld here, now that means that's other side of arrow. That means we can weld inside of that pipe. So when you see this symbol with that little circle where the arrow is connected, that little circle, that means weld all the way around. Still follow your reference line if it's arrow side or opposite arrow side. As you keep looking at your symbol, welding symbol, excuse me, you'll see there's like a little flag thing that's sitting there. What does that mean? That means that that weld is done on the field. So you may fabricate a part here, but when you go out to the field, you make the weld out in the field. So you may make a subcomponent or assembly, but when you go install it, you may have to put a weld on it when you're actually installing that product. That's what that means. This is a field weld. That means it's done out in the field. And keep in mind too, we also have our tail. That's what's here. Anything can be put in the tail. For example, you might have a welding process here. You might have a position, and so on. It's just any additional information. So as you start breaking down these weld symbols, start somewhere and work your way. Don't look at the whole symbol as a whole and be overwhelmed. Look at that symbol. You may want to start arrow side, decide what symbol it is, and then start working your way left, right, top, bottom, however it may be. So right now I'm going to kind of break down so that we actually have the welding symbol kind of in place here. We kind of understand what some of the dimensions mean. I'm going to start breaking down some of these weld symbols themselves. So as you look at the page, you'll see there's a V-groove weld. What does that mean? I'll show you what a V-groove weld is. We're going to do them all on the board. So for example, this is what they call a single V-groove. This is what they call a double. So there's one on both sides. What does that look like? A double V-groove. You have a V on top, V on bottom. That's what your weld joint will look like. So as you start breaking these down, You have a bevel. This is a single bevel. This is a double bevel. Now you see the difference between a bevel and a V-groove? On a bevel, you can have a double bevel, but there's only one piece being prepped at all beveled groove welds. When you go to like a V-groove, you can see that there are two pieces being prepped. Bevels, there's only one piece being prepped. So as you start looking through those symbols, keep that in mind. What does your bevel symbol actually look like? Looks like this. You can add, for example, this one right here is a single bevel. You can add another bevel to the other side, making that a double bevel, and that's what that joint would look like. So as we keep kind of going through groove welds, you have what they call a U-groove. Symbol for a U-groove looks like this. So your pieces look like that. There's a U-groove, a single U-groove, a double U-groove would look like this. There's a U on both sides. Single, double. Now, they also have a symbol which is called a J. Basically, it's a half of a U. What's a J groove look like? Square on one side. A double J, if you're looking at your symbol like that, you have a J groove both sides. So you got a J groove on both sides. U, J. They're very similar to the bevel and the V groove. U, both pieces are being prepped. J groove, only one side of that joint is being prepped. And as you keep working your way through the symbols, that's what that kind of breaks down into. If you're ever confused on what the joint should look like, your symbol should give you a visual representation. For example, I always tell students, take everything out. If I got a symbol that looks like this, a double V groove, take all this off of it, draw it out. That's kind of what it should look like. You have a V on top, V on bottom. One thing to keep in mind, every symbol, like the fillet weld symbol, your bevel, doesn't matter what side the reference line is, your J groove, if it's on bottom, top, that vertical is always on the left-hand side. Very important. So for example, if we have a triangle on that reference line that looks like that, that's invalid. The vertical is on the wrong side. When you go to take your test, they are going to try to trick you. They're going to put that triangle both ways. So if we had a triangle with the vertical on the right, incorrect. That vertical is always on the left. So they're going to try putting your bevel, that is incorrect. That vertical is always on the left-hand side. Even with your J grooves, they're going to try tricking you on your test and put that vertical on the right-hand side. Those are not symbols. That vertical will always be on the left-hand side. So, as we keep going through the book, a lot of symbols on there. There's a square groove symbol. Basically, what's a square groove look like? You take two pieces and you butt them up. There is no preparation to the material. That also you can still have your, for example, you can have your root opening. So that means there's a gap between those two pieces and all that. So once you get that original format of sides and media to the left, for fillet, grooves, whatever. And then when you get a groove weld, so you got the number, another number to the left. That first number is always depth of preparation, size. Then your weld symbol, fillet welds, number immediately to the left, always size. To the right is always length and pitch. So as you work your way through this unit, through other chapters, once you get that format down, it's going to make things a lot easier. And then as you work your way away, up or down, road opening is always first, angle, second, contour, and whatever finishing process we're going to use. Now there are quite a few other symbols in this book too. And like I said, each chapter as we go is going to break these symbols apart. For example, I think our next unit is chapter 15. It is basically all fillet welds. Following chapter 16 is all groove welds. And they're all going to start following this format. So as you look at your reference line, keep in mind the most common error I have with students is arrow side or other arrow side. So keep in mind that means arrow side. So as we have our weld, that weld is being placed on our arrow side or other side, whatever it may be. That's probably the most common error that I have with my students. Hopefully that helped you out when you start chapter 14. Keep in mind, if you ever have any questions, feel free to contact me or another instructor that's in the room, or whatever it may be. We'll see if we can get your answers for your questions. Thank you.